Talking of strangeness, let's talk about what happened in South Korea yesterday. Ross Feingold is here, political risk analyst focusing on Asia. Yesterday, the president of South Korea declared emergency martial law. I think nobody was expecting it, I think I'm right in saying. He accused the country's opposition of controlling the parliament and sympathising with North Korea. He talks about criminal elements in the parliament. But the army came out onto the streets and the people basically fought them off. So the coup appears to have failed. Ross, a very good morning to you.
Good afternoon from Taiwan.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. I mean, is that a fair summation of what happened yesterday? It seems to me it was the most unsuccessful military coup ordered by a president of any country in the history of the world.
That's right. Come to talk to hear common sense, as your slogan goes. But clearly, President Yoon did not act with any common sense a little less than 24 hours ago when he declared martial law. Now, initially, under Korea's constitution, if the National Assembly votes otherwise, then the president has to end the martial law. So that's what happened. But this will definitely go down as one of the all-time boneheaded moves in any democracy.
Yeah. Incredible, because I think most people in the West, and even those of us who don't know very much about South Korea, see South Korea, generally speaking, as a pretty successful westernised nation. They don't see it as run in a kind of, haphazard manner. And it seems to be a democracy. Yes, it's got North Korea as a neighbour. But I think this came as a massive surprise to everyone, didn't it?
That's right. Those of us with a little longer memories might remember that South Korea was basically a military dictatorship for lengthy periods during the Cold War era. Some of us might remember before the totalitarian state phase ended in the mid to late 80s that students were always taking to the street and battling the security forces. But basically for the last 40 years, South Korea, as well as here in Taiwan, which had martial law for 38 years, both of these countries are considered democratic successes. They're also considered economic successes as well. So I don't think anyone imagined that a South Korean president, even if his relations with the opposition party, which controls the National Assembly, even if his relationship with the opposition and the Korean parliament had deteriorated to such an extent, I don't think anyone imagined he would try this move to improve his standing or to exert better power over the country.
No. And now some of those opposition parties have submitted a motion to impeach the president over what happened. Will that succeed?
It's very likely. They need 2/3 of the National Assembly members to vote to impeach. If that's successful, it goes to the Constitutional Court for deliberation. And this is what happened to one of President Yoon's predecessors, Park Geun-hye. She was impeached and removed from office in 2017. So there's recent precedent for this. The opposition have about 190 seats in the National Assembly, so they'll need a few defections from the ruling party. But as of now, it looks very likely that they're going to get that, and they'll reach the 2/3 necessary to remove the president from office while the case goes to the Constitutional Court for deliberation.
Right. And there's suggestions that there's a bit of corruption involved as well with the president's office or the office of the president. What would happen next if he was impeached? Would he then be possibly prosecuted?
Well, he'd be if the impeachment vote is successful, he's temporarily removed from office, and then the Constitutional Court will deliberate. If they vote yes at the Constitutional Court, then he's removed from office, and then he'd be open to criminal prosecution by the prosecutorial services. So it's a multi-step process. But one of the hallmarks, unfortunately, of South Korea's democracy, and although I just said it's considered a democratic success here in Asia, there's been very frequent cases of corruption surrounding officials at the top of the power structure, whether it's the president or the prime minister or ministers, and whether it's their families or friends. There's been a repeating problem with people cashing in on knowing who's in power. So that's been one of the downsides of South Korean democracy. And even in the case of President Yoon, his wife has been implicated in corruption and receiving gifts from corporate interests who needed something done by the government. So that certainly hurt his image and has led, again, to the deterioration in his relationship with the opposition.
Right. And we're looking at live pictures here, Ross, of protests outside the Parliament just a day after that martial law declaration. So, I mean, it's going to be a febrile place for a few days, I guess.
I think that's fair to say. Clearly, the public did not approve of this move. Even before this, President Yoon's approval rating was something like 10%. It could barely get any worse. And people were not afraid last night when he made the announcement. People were clearly not afraid of the military taking the president's side and enforcing martial law. So people immediately came out to the streets. And that's one of the reasons why the martial law collapsed within a few hours.
Yeah, I mean, amazing scenes, really. A lot of the protesters saying, you know, sort of taking on the soldiers who were armed, saying, aren't you ashamed to be doing it? I read a first-person report, an account of a female MP who crawled through the legs of the guys who were marching on the Parliament with machine guns. They were firing fire extinguishers back at them. I mean, it took a bit of a risk, to be honest.
Yeah, they certainly did, but I think they probably had the right, or the correct, I should say, the correct inclination that a lot of the soldiers who were just conscripts, they're young South Korean men who do mandatory military service, their intuition was probably correct that young South Korean soldiers had no intention of firing on their own people. Now, again, it does appear that some of the senior leaders in the military were willing to go along with President Yoon's martial law proclamation. So that also needs to be sorted out, that some of their senior military leaders might also be removed. That's something that'll be sorted out in the coming weeks and months. And then, of course, there's the North Korea angle to this. Although that's a military dictatorship, a totalitarian state as well, they're probably laughing their butts off at all of this over in North Korea.
Yeah, I bet they are. Yeah, absolutely. Ross, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for the education. Ross Feingold, the political risk analyst focusing on Asia. He's there in Taiwan.